Orheiul Vechi's limestone canyon hides an underground monastery labyrinth and supports a rare steppe forest microclimate almost nowhere else in Europe. Do you know the Dniester River near Saharna can spill into hidden oxbow islands after the spring thaw, where monks once planted secret vineyards and carved cliffside chapels? Carved into limestone cliffs above the Raud River, Orheiul Vechi reveals a troglodyte monastery complex that survives in Europe like few others. Its sheltered cave chapels, stone niches, and frescoed sanctuaries cling to a narrow valley where history, nature, and faith merge. Walk from the ruins of the ancient Ghetto-Dacian settlement down to the medieval fortifications, and you feel centuries layering underfoot. From the hilltop, terraces spill into the valley, where shepherds once grazed, and pilgrims still leave icons at carved altars. Botanical village sits nearby, its wooden houses and folk workshops, keeping traditional crafts alive and offering a bridge from living culture to a sacred silence. Local guides will lead you along cliffside steps into small chapels where candles flicker and inscriptions whisper forgotten names. In spring, the surrounding vineyards and wild thyme scent the air, turning the approach to the monastery into a procession of aromas as well as views. Archaeologists have found pottery and coins here that trace trade routes from the Black Sea to Central Europe, evidence that this hidden gorge was once a crossroads. The Old Orhei open-air complex continues into caves where monks carved cells and kitchens directly from the rock, creating an entire city inside the cliff. Follow the narrow path, and it leads you across rickety wooden bridges to isolated hermitages that taught patience and perseverance to medieval ascetics. A short drive connects Orheiul Vechi to the nearby tip of a monastery carved on a steeper promontory, forming a string of cliff monasteries along the road. Together, these sites sketch a map of spiritual resilience, where landscape itself became architecture. Visitors often find the silence here louder than any cathedral choir, filled with wind, water, and the distant bleat of sheep. Stay until dusk and watch the limestone glow, revelation before the valley folds into night. Every bench, statue, and linden tree carries a story that links the city to the surrounding Caudru Hills and underground wine culture. Walk beneath the canopy and you feel the same hush as in the older woodlands outside the city, but with monuments and promenades layered over nature. This is where locals come to meet. Lovers linger under lamplight, and elders recount memories of festivals, revolutions, and harvests tied to the land. At the park's main avenue stands the bronze figure of Stefan Mare, not just a statue, but a focal point that anchors public memory and connects to the city's cathedral and the nearby Triumphal Arch. From here, a straight pedestrian axis links the park to the National Museum and onward toward Chisinau's wine cellars, so a stroll becomes a compact journey through Moldova's cultural map. Seasonal rhythms are striking. Spring magnolias give way to chestnut canopies in summer, golden leaves in autumn, and the park's ponds mirror the sky in winter. Festival stages, open-air book markets, and impromptu concerts transform those seasonal changes into living customs that echo rural celebrations across Moldova. Beneath the surface, you can trace water channels and old landscaping that borrowed ideas from the Caudru's natural drainage, an unseen dialogue between city planners and the countryside. And when you follow the park's winding paths toward the edge of the city, small alleys unravel into vineyards and the famous subterranean wineries, reinforcing the park's role as a bridge between urban life and Moldova's ancient land. In just a few steps, the park's greenery yields to cobbled streets, leading to cafes where wine is poured with the same reverence people give to the park's linden trees. Here, a walk through Stefan Mare Central Park becomes an introduction to Moldova's larger story of forests, vines, and a people who fold nature into everyday life. Visitors often leave surprised that an urban square can carry such layered ecological and cultural memory, a living atlas compressed into a few hectares. By the end of that stroll, the park hasn't just been seen, it has been felt, understood as a living seam stitching Chisinau to the rare Caudru remnants and the endless wine cellars beneath Moldova's soil. Hidden in Eastern Europe, Moldova cradles a river canyon where sheer cliffs, sacred springs, and a cascade form one of the country's most extraordinary natural sanctuaries. Do you know, Saharna Monastery sits tucked into that canyon, its cells and chapels clinging to cliffs above a waterfall that pilgrims say heals the spirit. The monastery's whitewashed structures blend with the stone, but the real marvel is below. Dozens of small rock hermitages carved into grottos by generations of ascetics. Here, narrow footpaths thread from chapel to cave, and the air carries the scent of damp moss and centuries of whispered prayers. A spring at the base of the cliff is famous. Pilgrims fill bottles of its cold, clear water and leave votive ribbons on the branches nearby. Legends say the spring first appeared after a miraculous vision, and its reputation has drawn seekers from across Moldova for centuries. Monastic life here is deliberately simple. Morning prayers, candlelight vigils, and solitary retreats in the cave cells set into the cliffs. Visitors often find themselves moving from noisy curiosity to reverent silence simply by stepping past the gate. Local guides still tell stories of monks who vanished into the caves for weeks, returning with songs and strange protective icons. The monastery's small museum preserves handwritten service books and weathered wooden crosses that map a quieter history of Moldova's faith. Outside the stone walls, the landscape opens to trails that climb to lookout points, where you can see orchards, forests, and river bends folded like pages. Those views make the monastery feel less like an isolated relic and more like the heart of a living landscape that keeps drawing people back. At dusk, the cliffs take on a honeyed hue, and the monks' chants float down to the waterfalls, turning the ordinary into something close to the miraculous. To follow Saharna's paths is to travel not only across terrain, but through time, from natural wonder into a human quest that continues today. Photographers come for the dramatic interplay of rock and water, but many leave humbled by the quiet discipline of those who tend the place. If you trace the trail from Saharna deeper along the Dniester corridor, you begin to understand how Moldova's small sites stitch together a rich, often overlooked spiritual geography. High, windswept limestone cliffs at Old Orhei reveal one of the world's rare steppe canyon monasteries carved into the very rock of a meandering river gorge. Do you know Old Orhei, known locally as Orheiul Vechi, shelters a layered history from Scythian settlements to medieval cave churches that few places on Earth still keep intact. Walk the narrow paths and you encounter earthen mounds of ancient fortresses clinging to the ridge and silent cells hollowed by monks centuries ago. The Raud River cuts the valley like a ribbon, and beneath its cliffs lie tiny villages such as Trebujeni, where time seems to slow. Every rock face tells a story of nomads, traders, and hermits whose inscriptions and relics are still being uncovered. From Old Orhei's high viewpoint, you can spot the terraced vineyards that hint at Moldova's intimate bond between land and wine. The cave monastery itself contains fresco fragments and narrow chapels that force you to imagine the quiet devotion of those who lived inside the stone. Guides will take you from the main plateau down to the riverbank, where reed beds give way to hidden caves and ancient burial sites. As the sun drops, shadows deepen in the cave doorways, and you sense how natural light shaped rituals and refuge for generations. Old Orhei is less a single site than a hinge, a place where geology, faith, and daily life meet and open pathways to Moldova's hidden treasures. Stay with this valley, and you will discover how those pathways lead to cellars, monasteries, and rivers that define an entire nation's soul. Next, we will follow the road downstream to uncover one of Moldova's most surprising natural spectacles, a short journey that begins at these very cliffs. Prepare to find a waterfall and an ancient rock complex that change everything you thought you knew about this quiet country. Leaving the limestone hush of Krakowa's underground cellars, we climb into daylight and find Dendrarium Park, Chisinau's living museum of trees and quiet paths. This arboretum cradles hundreds of species, rare maples and exotic pines woven into avenues that feel centuries old. Walk beneath canopies where plane trees and lindens create a cathedral of leaves, and notice how rare specimens from Asia and North America adapt to Moldova's soils. Meandering paths lead to mirror-still ponds, where water lilies drift among willows and koi slip like living ink. Botanists come here to study resilient varieties that survived frosts and wars, and gardeners follow secret grafting techniques passed down through generations. Benches carved from fallen trunks invite pauses long enough to hear the wind translate the park's history into rustling pages. In spring, magnolias explode in heady perfume that pulls locals from apartment blocks and students from campuses. Summer brings shade and storytelling. Elders remember picnics under the same branches planted by their grandparents. Hidden groves host microclimates where subtropical shrubs thrive, as if exiled to a balmy shore. Children trace the bark of ancient oaks, convinced each knot maps a legend about the city itself. A A small greenhouse holds succulents and orchids collected by past directors, fragile survivors of distant deserts and jungles. Paths climb to a viewpoint where the city's silhouette flirts with the horizon, connecting green calm to urban pulse. Every tree has a label and a story, and guides will tell you which species once fueled medicinal remedies and which were planted to honor poets. The park folds into neighboring neighborhoods, becoming a green spine that links civic spaces and quiet homes. As daylight softens, lantern-lit trails reveal mushrooms and mosses that glow faintly, a secret night display few tourists witness. Leaving Dendrarium, you carry more than fresh air. You carry the memory of a living library that keeps Moldova's natural and cultural roots intertwined. In winter, the park's silhouettes lace the sky with frost, and even bare branches appear sculpted, turning the landscape into a monochrome gallery. Researchers and lovers alike return through the year, because Dendrarium keeps changing its chapters while always remaining a constant page in Moldova's story. Here, the Dniester River cuts through limestone gorges to form Moldova's only true canyon, sheltering relict forests and endemic species. Do you know the Dniester River harbors some of the region's last free-flowing meanders, creating a patchwork of oxbow lakes that teem with life? Its braided channels and floodplains act like living arteries, nourishing vineyards on the hills above and feeding the sinkholes that sculpt the surrounding landscape. As the river folds around rocky promontories, it has carried trade, legends, and invaders for centuries, linking remote monasteries to fortress towns like Soroka. In spring, the Dniester swells into a shimmering highway for migrating birds, and by autumn, its reed beds become secret nurseries for fish that sustain riverside villages. Walk along its banks, and you can still find fishermen using techniques passed down generations, their baskets and traps, a living thread to Moldova's rural past. The river's turquoise pools hide chalky cliffs, stained with centuries of mineral runoff, and caves where history and prehistory overlap in silence. Downstream, the Dniester's slow, wide bends lap at the expanses of wet meadows that feed rich soils for crops and the modest estates of old noble families. From the lookout points near Orheiul Vechi, you can watch the river snake away, a line that once guided settlers and monks to sheltered hollows in the rock. Its floodplain mosaics are living classrooms for biologists who come to map rare orchids, dragonflies, and the shy European otter that slips through the reeds. Human stories cling to the Dniester as tightly as moss to stone. Flooded villages, whispered border disputes, and songs that remember crossings under moonlight. Today, the river is both border and bridge, dividing political maps while binding communities through shared harvests, markets, and seasonal festivals. Follow its flow westward, and the Dniester threads into an ancient network of trails that lead toward the Black Sea and beyond, traces of trade routes still visible in field patterns. Navigation here is modest, intimate. Boatmen know hidden channels that avoid sandbars and areas where the current hides submerged groves of tree stumps. Kodri Natural Reserve shelters rare fragments of primeval oak and beech forest that survive in very few places in Europe. Do you know that Kodri's ancient groves slope toward the outskirts of Chisinau, where a stark monument to victims of Soviet occupation stands? The monument rises like a geometric wound in the city's green belt, a place of quiet interruption. Its surfaces are raw and unadorned, deliberately refusing comfort or ornamentation. Visitors find inscriptions and sealant stone plains arranged to suggest absence rather than presence. Families return to touch the names, to trace the thin letters that insist on memory, even when history tried to erase it. From the hilltop, the memorial looks out over vineyards and cellars, tying personal loss to the broader landscape of Moldova. That connection is intentional. The designers wanted to anchor grief in the land that witnessed the deportations and the disappearances. Nearby pathways lead from the monument into the older districts, and then into the open fields where whole villages were emptied. That journey underscores a truth about Moldova. The land keeps both harvest and history, wine cellars and wounds, folded into the same soil. The monument does not offer closure. Instead, it opens a conversation about responsibility, recovery, and the small acts that rebuild communities. School groups and foreign visitors stand side by side, reading inscriptions and learning that remembrance is an active practice. In the late light, the stone silhouette becomes a compass point, a human marker set against Moldova's enduring horizons. Leaving that place, you carry both the weight of what happened and the startling resilience that keeps those stories alive. Hidden beneath Chisinau's urban canopy lies the Botanical Garden, home to one of Europe's richest oak collections. Its living library boasts rare steppe species, subtropical exotics, and century-old trees planted by botanists generations ago. Stroll beneath linden and maple canopies, and you'll find microclimates sculpted by soil and shadow. A maze of ponds and herbaceous borders shelters amphibians and migratory birds that use the garden as an urban refuge. Botanical researchers here maintain seed banks and living collections that trace Moldova's changing landscapes through centuries. Hidden trial plots test drought-resistant cultivars, quietly shaping the region's future in the face of climate uncertainty. In spring, the greenhouse corridors explode with orchids and bulb displays collected from expeditions across the Black Sea basin. Curators preserve rare Caucasian and Pontic endemics, species that few visitors expect to find on Moldova's flat plains. Every path tells a story. Memorial trees planted after wars, experimental orchards feeding communities, and medicinal gardens reviving ancient remedies. Lay people are surprised to learn the garden's herbarium houses tens of thousands of pressed specimens, documenting Moldova's botanical identity. Seasonal festivals transform lawns into classrooms where children learn grafting, seed saving, and the language of leaves. Walking from the arboretum toward the vineyards, you cross ecological gradients that mirror Moldova's agricultural heart. The Royal Forest Prut Floodplain harbors one of Europe's last intact riverine floodplain ecosystems, where ancient oaks and willows weave island-like forests across seasonal wetlands. Do you know that the Royal Forest Prut Floodplain serves as a migratory sanctuary for over 200 bird species, including long-legged herons and endangered raptors? In spring, the river spills its banks and sculpts a mosaic of channels, oxbow lakes, and reed beds that support amphibians and rare freshwater fish. shifting waters set a rhythm for life here, driving cycles of growth, decay, and renewal that few landscapes on the continent still follow. From the limestone caves and vineyard terraces we visited earlier, the terrain softens into lowland water meadows, where beavers engineer ponds and willow corridors guide the flood. Local fishermen still use traditional punts and woven traps, keeping crafts passed down through generations that mirror the floodplain's slow, patient pace. Beneath cathedral canopies of twisted oak, mosses and fen flowers carpet the ground, and in hidden hollows, tiny orchids and marsh gentians surface each summer. Otters slip through submerged tangles, while night herons and kingfishers hunt along sunlit margins, offering a daily theater of survival. Scientists come to study its tangled hydrology, but villagers guard other secrets: seasonal pastures where rare breeds graze and ceremonial willow weavings bind community life to the river. Conservationists have worked with locals to map safe routes, replant floodplain woodland, and revive old meadow practices that keep the ecosystem fertile. Walk here, and you can still find centuries-old trees whose trunks record generations of floods in rings and scars, living archives of the Prut's moods. Follow one of the braided channels at dusk, and you might glimpse a ghostly procession of cranes settling on the last light, a sight few travel guides mention. This is a landscape written in water, where every bend carries a story of migration, survival, and human adaptation to nature's pulse. And as we leave the Royal Forest Prut Floodplain, another secret waits downstream, a river town whose architecture preserves a forgotten trade between shore and steppe. Perched atop a gentle hill, Manastirea Curch embraces a panorama of rolling vineyards and the silvery threads of the Route River. Its whitewashed facades and slender bell tower are rare in Moldova for combining orthodox monastic austerity with refined Baroque ornamentation. Inside, frescoes survive that blend Byzantine iconography with local peasant motifs, a visual conversation you won't find in the country's larger cathedrals. Dozens of monks once tended bee yards and cellars here, producing honey and wine that sustained the community through long winters. Wandering the cloisters, you can still find carved wooden benches and iron nails hammered by hands from 3 centuries ago. The bell tower's voice carried messages across the valley for weddings, warnings, and midnight prayers, preserving a living rhythm of the countryside. From Curch, narrow footpaths descend toward limestone outcrops, where hermitages and cave chapels pepper the river gorge. That same limestone spine leads travelers to Orheiul Vechi, linking the monastery to cliff-faced settlements and ancient archaeological layers. Local guides whisper of hidden cellars beneath the grounds where manuscripts and relics were secreted during invasions. Few visitors realize that beneath the polished floorboards, one can trace the faint outline of an older wooden church swallowed by time. In spring, white poplars along the monastery road explode into leaves, and the air fills with the scent of fresh hay and plums drying on racks. Monastic gardens still supply simple dishes at the refectory, where bread is broken according to rituals passed down from abbots to novices. A short drive from Curch brings you to Topova's river caves, reminding you how Moldova's sacred sites form a chain of altitude and resilience. Each site hands you another page of a scattered story, from cliff monasteries to cellar churches, stitched together by river and soil. From the crystal-cool drops of Saharna's waterfalls to the endless underground rivers of wine at Cricova and Milești, Moldova offers contrasts that feel imagined. Each cellar holds millions of bottles and corridors that could rival small cities, preserving vintages and stories across centuries. On the surface, the limestone cliffs of Orheiul Vechi cradle ancient caves and monasteries carved into the rock, whispering of monks and empires. Not far away, the rolling Codri forests and the serene meanders of the Dniester River sustain a rural rhythm that keeps old traditions alive. Soroka's white fortress towers speak of borderlands and builders, while tiny villages stitch together folklore, craftsmanship, and grape harvests. Travelers who trace the route from fortified walls to quiet vineyards will find each stop folding naturally into the next like chapters in one long, surprising book. Taste becomes history here. Every glass of wine is a map, every monastery a marker, and every path a conversation between land and people. Leave with more than photos. Bring back questions you didn't know to ask, and stories that will tug you back for another visit. Moldova's secrets are small enough to hold in your palm and vast enough to change the way you think about borders, depth, and time. So when you think you've seen its surface, remember the underground cities, the river-hidden monasteries, and the forests that still keep their own calendar. Come curious, leave altered, and let Moldova's hidden wonders keep working on you long after the journey ends. There's more waiting beneath the soil and behind the stones. The rest of the story is yours to discover.